understanding Polish politics can be an increasingly tricky task, not only since the last elections, but in fact for at least 6, 7, maybe 8 years even. What's been happening in Poland and why has it been so confusing to really understand it more in depth? So essentially you can, depending on your personal criteria of successful parties, successful leaders, charismatic political leadership in general, well, some people will define political success as economic policies, as the overall well-being of society in the economic, financial sense, most likely. Some people will go along the lines of national pride, a sense of patriotism, traditional values. Others would want more progress, etc., etc. So there need to be some common denominators, or at least points of reference where you can figure out where you stand on the political spectrum, regardless of whether you are more right-wing, left-wing, or somewhere in between. For me, it has always been ethics as a point of reference, because beyond a certain point in ethics, you cannot really take politicians seriously, or you probably shouldn't take politicians seriously. What do I mean by that? Take the most easy to explain example of Hitler and his Nazi regime and the Nazi propaganda of Goebbels and other crooks involved. Now, if you were to look at Hitler's policies, Hitler's impact on Germany in a broad socio-economic sense, you would likely recognize the fact that during his reign, shall we call it, during his reign, the country became a lot more powerful. Economically, financially, it became a lot more proud. In infrastructure terms, it has seen massive development in multiple fields and disciplines, and yet it feels somehow wrong to talk about any economic aspects of Hitler's era. Why? Because of the power, the sheer obnoxiousness of his ethical legacy. So you cannot really start a serious, mature conversation about Hitler with the socio-economic angle of it, because of the sheer ethical load of his crimes against humanity, of his genocide, of his philosophy of Übermensch. So there are many, many reasons why ethics matters in any political discussion. How does that relate to Poland, to contemporary Poland? It does, because if you go through everything that has happened in Poland over the last 8 years when Law and Justice was in power, and don't get me wrong, this is not meant to compare Law and Justice era in any way, really, except maybe the propaganda efforts to the Hitler era. But what I'm trying to say here is that if you go through all of the achievements of Law and Justice in the past 8 years, and all of the sins of Law and Justice, the latter category is so important, in fact, that it makes it almost immoral to talk about their achievements, sad as it sounds. And at the end of the day, when you look through all they have done, all they have achieved, and the ways they chose to go about it, my personal conclusion is this. Now, it may sound radical to you, but to me, if I were to summarize the last 8 years of Law and Justice, including what's happening now, that they are forced back into the opposition seats, I would say this. You cannot possibly be an intelligent, mature, and responsible person and want to have anything to do with Law and Justice. Like, seriously. The level of compromising ethics, the propaganda machine that they had set in motion already back in 2015 and 16 especially, taking over the public media, the state media, utilizing lots and lots of different sources of public funds to push their own agenda, political propaganda. And they did so in ways that were both crude and radical, but also sophisticated and multidimensional. So it's kind of ironic that the single most anachronistic party, if you look at Law and Justice before 2015, suddenly became the most sophisticated political marketing party in Poland. The party historically associated with really the elderly people, the conservative, in hindsight, would be too much of a compliment. I don't see them as conservative. I don't see them as religious. I don't see them as people grounded in traditional values. I believe it's a creation, it's a facade, appearances to achieve specific goals and pamper to their favorite electorate, which is primarily the most vulnerable, the most gullible, the most uneducated section of the Polish society, sad as it is, but not exclusively. The propaganda they set in motion was successful enough to win very different types of voters. And it would be quite tricky to establish some common ground for them other than what I've just mentioned.